Hello, 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 hello. Wow. Well, hopefully you're reading me crystal clear and you're hearing Melia crystal clear. She's over here. She is here with me today. She's not on camera, but she is on mic because her and I have gone through something and we felt it really important to bring to you guys. We have also, we both been like handing this nasty cold, whatever you want to call it, back and forth. So we've been battling it over and over and over. So we apologize that we haven't been able to come to you, as well as we've had some really bad internet issues here. And it's not that I don't have a strong connection, but it has, well, digital static in it. So occasionally I drop out. So right now it's working well, and hopefully it continues to work well. So say a prayer for that. Bob Fox, thank you so much for saying 5x5. You hear me great. Awesome. That's so good to see. I believe good to see you here. We'll get some of the hellos out of the way, since this may be a show that you have to stick around for. 303 viewers. That's great. I love that. Let me see who else is here. Freedom Grower, good to see you here as well. Nancy Smith. Nancy, by the way, we have your scarves and hat combination that you made. We love them. We love them. We will get you video with us wearing them. They're awesome. Love the crown, by the way. Thank you so much. And just an amazing, it's amazing to get gifts like that from people. Just, taking the time to put those things. Wildman, good to see you. Helen Freeman, Ray Mary, kind of T Hunting Wolf, good to see you. Divine Renegade, good to see you as well. Wow. So a lot of, there's also a lot of new names here. Hirai something, Rick Kersey. I know Rick. Good to see you, Rick. Jeffrey McLean, good to see you as well. Ken Drover, Lauren T, Love is Silent. Todd Jacobs, a Scrub is here. Good to see you, Scrub. Always good to see the Scrub. And yes, he says this year is going to be interesting, to say the least. So, let me see where we get started with this. Like I was saying, that Melia and I have gone through some information here, and we have specifically analyzed a documentary that is made by somebody that is, I would say that as a director, and I look at his attributes, he has a fascination for, okay, so Russia has a longer history here. It cut out. I'm sorry. Russia has a much longer history than we have in this country. And so you have to understand that history. But what we're talking about here today is, and the title of this is Russia a New World Order holdout? Ukraine versus Russia. Does that have something to do with it? Can you get a howdy, Derek? Yes. Slaya XD39. Good to see you. It's a remarkable thing that has taken place and has taken place. This is nothing new. I'm just going to let you know right now. There is nothing new under the sun. Nothing. When it comes to this, you're going to see as we walk through some things, and Melia was diligent in taking down timestamps and everything, and hopefully we get it, we get enough of it right, because we had to review a couple hours of video footage, and not to mention just kind of verifying some historical aspects to it that we were doing as well, to make sure that the things that are said in this movie, in this documentary, are correct. And guess what? Most of them are. And the reality is, this is a documentary that is made by a director, but also part of the documentary is Oliver Stone. Now, I'll tell you one thing that I do know about Oliver Stone, because I've met him and I spent about 5 days with him in Europe. And he showed up for dinner one night and then ended up hanging out with us for probably a little more than the weekend. And I can tell you the one thing that I did learn from him, it's not that he has a political bent. People would call him a liberal or Democrat or whatever. But the reality is, what I got from him is he has a very natural suspicion and doubt and really lack of trust for government. I say probably a good thing. It's good to see Best Damn Podcast is here. Thank you for telling people to hit the like button. Yes, please hit the like, share this. And if you haven't subscribed, subscribe, because there's going to be more of this coming. Now, we've had to take some time also to do some things so we can also earn a living right now, but obviously that's even changing. So there are many, many things up in the air, but the whole thing is, as Christ said, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, that's what this is all about. And let your hearts not be troubled, because this all must come to pass. But why must it come to pass? Why? Because it's called a revealing. Things need to be revealed. They need to be overturned. We need to be able to show you this stuff in your face. And crazy enough as it is, whether you like Putin or not, whether you think he's a madman or not, whether you think he's a dictator or not, he is part of that equation. Even those that believe in God, there were always bad people used. God would use people to do certain things, to demonstrate certain things. However, I think God in this instance may not be Father God, but also everything is Father filtered. Ultimately, Melia loves to say that, and I just love it when she does, because it's a great reminder. But what is taking place right now between Russia and Ukraine has a very long history. And I can tell you right now that since World War I, it's been going on. And World War I started right after the Federal Reserve was established. So let's start there. In 1913, the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve Act was established here in the United States. And supposedly they ratified the Constitution, which really never happened. At least I'm told. So historically speaking, so that took place. Then just a little under a year later, in 1914, World War I began. So since then, the Reserve and all of the Z bankers and all of these components have played a role in every single military conflict and action across the globe, period. Or flat earthers across the flat round tabletop, but over the whole thing. So, sorry, I'm just going to always try to cover all the bases to help those people that are in between in different places of their enlightenment and their awakening, in their ascension, so to speak, because ascension is recognizing these things. First of all, it's impossible for you to recognize them and see them unless you're willing to die to the things that you thought you knew. You can't see them otherwise. So this is clearly going to be one of those things that if somebody is upset by watching and seeing history, problem. It's a problem because you just can't, you're not willing to accept that truth. And that's where I love Jake. So telling the truth, no matter what the cost, you want it all. You always want the truth. And it's important. It's important to me. I could care less what the truth is. I just want to know what it is. But at the same time, even when I absorb something that registers as true, I still hold it in a place where I go, there is possibly multiple different angles to see this thing from. So this is what this show is all about today. And we felt it important. And neither Melia and I are 100%. So we apologize. I mean, you probably see in my eyes, we're tatered. I almost wore this hat today. Welcome to you see that? It's a great hat, isn't it? Got it from downtown here in Prescott, Arizona. It's great. Welcome to the shit show. And that's definitely what it is. It's like, isn't it like for you guys, isn't it like watching this world stage? It's like a massive Truman Show production, except on a global level. And we're all Trumans. Melia probably spelled wrong. Yes, you spelled Melia's name wrong, but you know, the thought is what counts. So we're going to go through this, and let me share something. First of all, I want to share this video and just watch this short little clip. And this is Joe Biden talking before the Council of Foreign Relations, CFR, and he's talking about a deal with Ukraine. And we'll talk about this right after.
Convincing that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from...
Are you not hearing that?
I can hear it, can't see it.
Oh, you can't see it. Oh, it should be on the screen. Hold on. Let me go back here. Okay, let me start this again. Thank you, Melia, for correcting my nonsense.
convincing that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over, for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
Yes. And ironically, let me just bring this up. Ironically, that exact video and that conversation that he had with Ukraine at the time is precisely what they accused Donald Trump of doing. The exact same thing. So understand that we are working with Sololinsky tactics, okay? And things are played out. These are programs. These are operations. They are psychological operations, and they have been going on a very, very long time. And you must understand that, let me bring this up. You must understand that these operations that we conduct, these CIA color wars, these have been a part of the regime change that you've heard many people speak of. We do it better than anybody else, but that doesn't mean that Putin doesn't do this as well. So everybody has to fight on the same battlefield, and the battlefield rarely has to do with tanks and bullets. I've lost my, there we are, I'm back. These operations, I'm telling you, if you understand, and you're going to understand the gravity of how involved we're in the Ukraine. First of all, what is Biden protecting there? What was he really talking about? The prosecutor that he was talking about that they wanted fired was investigating Burisma, the company that Hunter Biden was on the board of. And he didn't like that, that investigation. I wonder why. We have a massive money laundering operation that has taken place in the Ukraine, and not just for the U.S., for many other organizations outside of the U.S., many other countries, that when somebody needs some extra dough, the politician convinces his people to give Ukraine $1 billion in aid because they need it, right? They need it to defend against big bad old Russia. But if you understand just how volatile that situation is there, Ukraine is not just a bunch of Ukrainian people. It's Ukrainian people, and half of them, literally half the country, are sympathizers to Russia and love Russia. And half the country are sympathizers to, well, I don't know, it's going to seem kind of crazy, but all verifiable. And we're going to show you they are all Nazis. Nazis. Half of the country are Nazi sympathizers. Now, why would Putin have an issue with Nazi sympathizers? People say that Putin's a Nazi, right? Well, no, actually, Putin has more ties and more connections to Israel. And considering that the vast and they're real, most of them have Russian names. Their names are Russian, and they change them to Hebraic names. Benjamin Netanyahu is not his name. So when you begin to understand the relationships between all of these things and the historical values of them and the positions, I'm not saying anybody is correct. Let me make this very, very abundantly clear. Neither Melia or I are saying Putin is a great guy. Neither of us. And neither will I say that Biden is a good guy or that the U.S. is the good guy. Why would I make such a naive statement? So we're going to go through this movie here, and it's called Ukraine on Fire, and it's available for free. So you can watch this after the show, but we're going to walk through some pieces and point out some things. And I will leave put the link in the description box. And also, if this video, for whatever reason, is taken down, I will have uploaded it, and I will upload it to RenewTube, renewtube.org. So that is our social media streaming platform. And you're going to start seeing a lot more of that there. Let me see. So they're not shadow banning us too bad, but let's get to this. Now, Melia, what did you, because I want to ask Melia a question here, because when we first started watching this is what I love about these types of projects. This is a movie. Let me give you this detail here. Let me go to its IMDb. In this. This was released. To read this film review just for those that are coming and won't be able to stick around. And then we're going to go through the individual pieces, because this review doesn't really cover a fraction of what is actually within it. So this documentary explores the 2013 U.S. color revolution in the Ukraine that led to the replacement of Ukraine's democratically elected government with a coalition of neo-Nazi groups covertly supported CIA-funded foundations. Late investigative journalist Robert Perry, I wonder why he's late, appears in the film to describe his investigations into the role of the U.S. Embassy, CIA-funded foundations like the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, George Soros Renaissance Foundation, and the Dutch Embassy. The film begins exploring Hitler's invasion of the Ukraine in 1941. Western Ukraine welcomed the Nazis as this liberated them from the Soviet occupation. The OSS, which became the CIA in 1947, protected the Ukraine's Nazis, who had participated in genocidal terrorism against neighboring Poles and Ukrainian Jews to ensure they never stood trial for the crimes at Nuremberg. And guess what? They never did. They never did. They're still protected. And guess what? Some of them came here. In 1989, the Soviet Union began to disintegrate, and Ukrainian fascists the CIA had incubated formed the Ukrainian nationalist neo-Nazi group Svoboda. In 1994, 3 years after Ukraine declared independence, others would form far-right paramilitary organizations, Trizub. These and other U.S.-funded groups were extremely instrumental in Ukraine's first color revolution in 2005, the Orange Revolution. Think about all these now. This is what I'm going to be talking about here. Think about all these colors. This is why they're called color wars, because each one of these in each countries and each one of these groups always have a color associated with them. And many of them have a fist that looks like this as a signia, right? So just think about Black Lives Matter, Antifa, all of this. Because what we're experiencing and what we have experienced in this country over the last 2 years is literally almost play by play what took place in the Ukraine and why we're here today. So when you think that Putin is operating by the mainstream media's narrative where they say unprovoked, you have got to be smoking a lot of crack to buy that line. 2013 witnessed a similar color revolution. 2013. This is very recent, considering. Similar color revolution after Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych rejected a pending EU association agreement. When Yanukovych turned to Russia instead for financial support, the U.S.-backed fascist groups began a campaign of peaceful protests. Where have you heard that before? In Kiev's Maidan, which is their city square. As happens with many U.S.-sponsored color revolutions, fascists and neo-Nazi instigators quickly escalated their nonviolent protests into violent attacks against police and government officials with rocks, bats, metal bars, Molotov cocktails, and bulldozers. Again, familiar? With the help of the 3 EU leaders, government officials negotiated a truce with opposition leaders, which the violent protesters refused to honor. Now, we're going to show you this. This is really interesting because what happens is now this is where we're talking about peaceful protests, right? Because they did stir up peaceful people that went out peacefully. But then, even in some cases in this documentary, fake police show up. And when the fake police show up, these angry, violent protesters come out and start fighting with the police. And then the police beat the living hell out of all the peaceful protesters. Canada, ring a bell? So And so this deal that the EU leaders made with the government officials, they negotiated this truce, but it wasn't honored by the violent faction. So they negotiated with the peaceful protesters, and they all agreed to this truce. But the violent protesters didn't like that so much, and it ended up threatening his life and trying to kill him, the Ukrainian leader, which was not a U.S.-backed leader. Copy this. As soon as there's a non-U.S. backed leader in there, all hell breaks loose, because there's a lot of things there. Not to mention, at many of the locations that were struck, the United States has multiple biolabs, like more than 10 throughout Ukraine. Biolabs. Think Wuhan. So, rejected the penny when Yanukovych turned to Russia instead of for support. U.S.-backed financial groups campaign protested. They negotiated the truce. Although a paramilitary proposal to remove Yanukovych from the presidency lost by 68 votes in his parliament, or in his government body that is equal to parliament, the U.S. immediately recognized the head of the Ukrainian parliament as the new president. So, a leaked phone conversation between Victoria Nuland, the lead U.S. diplomat during the Ukraine crisis, confirms U.S. direct involvement in the 2014 coup. During the call, Nuland is heard instructing coup leaders on U.S. choices to form new government. The documentary also refutes the widespread mainstream media myth concerning Russian invasion of Crimea that never occurred. Didn't occur. It's crazy, isn't it? Concerned that the U.S. would organize a similar coup in the province of Crimea, predominantly Russian-speaking residents of Crimea seized the Crimean parliament in 2014. On March 17th, they organized popular referendum, which 96.77% voters with 90% turnout opted to leave Ukraine and request unification with Russian Federation. Now, when you look at this, predominantly Russian-speaking residents of Crimea seized predominantly Russian. Okay, so let me help you understand what's happened. Isn't this strange that you always thought it was Kiev and not Kyiv? And they're like, why is it Kyiv? And how come we always thought it was Kiev? People were like, oh, it's another Mandela effect. No, it's not a Mandela effect. This is a color war effect. This is a neo-Nazi effect. Because see, Kiev is very Russian. Like the Russians, but half the country is Russian. And half of them are Ukrainians. But the Ukrainians that are separatists that sympathize with the Nazis that took place all the way back from in World War I or in World War II, sorry. So Nazis run half of Ukraine. And when the Nazis are in control, the United States is happy? How do you like that? How do you like that? That we're a racist nation. Who says that? The very people that are the racists that actually agree with it. But who would be angry that we would be supporting such people in the Ukraine and continually propping them up? I don't know, Israel would be. But can Israel attack us? No. We give them too much money. Does Israel ever do that on their own? No, they just do it with smaller people that really can't do much back. And then again, you're not allowed to get a fight against them. So Russia acts on their behalf because, again, Ashkenazi Jews, same. Russians, you have to understand, you can see the sympathy there. It's there. Also on Vimeo is the documentary as well. You can look it up, Ukraine on Fire on Vimeo. That's where on this website. But you can go to this link, which we were going to review since it has the same time code that we've walked through. And we're going to watch some pieces of this so you can see for yourself. And it is incredible to watch. So before we start this, let me just make sure. Yes, convoy is not dangerous. The convoy might run into dangerous scenarios. Yes, you have to look, you're being led into this when you're a peaceful protester and it's being organized and it's allowed to organize. Let me tell you something. If trucks are allowed into DC and to surround the Capitol, they want that visual. Capiche? They want that, because the last time trucks were going to go in, because there was another convoy that was going to go there, they shut it down because they said it could be Trojan horses, and trucks could carry so much mass that they could detonate massive bombs, and they could. So let's walk through this. Melia, what was the first portion when you started watching this today? What was the first thing that, like the first bing that hit that we were watching that you were like, I
Derek, a little bit after some of the identification process of the video, which talks about the history of the Ukraine and why they've been positioned in the middle for so many years. This has been going on in Ukraine for, the last 100 years. Of course, it's a beautiful, beautiful land, pathway for Western pioneers, World War I, World War II, they're rich in resources. So they've been kind of used by these opposing forces on either side of them and all around them. So I don't know if any of you guys watched interviewed him, Derek. I can't remember. Christina Amanpour,
Yep.
who I found to be terribly distasteful in this interview.
Oh, she was awful.
She was awful. She was condescending, and they were like really denigrating him for being there because, I guess he was going to drop some dime. And he did say some things that were really telling. He said, here we are in Ukraine. We're right in the middle of all of you guys. And one of you guys is lying. One of you is, I'm dropping dime. This is a man, quite literally, Derek, is someone who knows the gravity of the situation he's facing. And they're all trying to tell him the gravity. And he's like, why are you telling me the gravity of the situation? I'm the guy walking this out. To Jesus at one point, and he says, what is truth? Now, here's a man who's a politician who's been using these rumors of wars, hot wars, cold wars, rumors of wars as strategic and tactical measures to keep people in line for years, right? He's Putin in this situation, if you will.
Yes.
He's Vladimir Putin. And he's going, I'm the guy. And Jesus, and he says, don't you know, you're not going to answer me? Don't you know that I have power over you to take your life? He just says, marvels at Jesus. And I love Jesus's response to him. He says, don't you know you wouldn't even have that power if it were not given to you from on high? And that just speaks from Jesus knowing his sovereignty. And it's exactly what I feel for each one of these people, no matter which side of the coin you fall on with, if you're more pro-Russian or more pro-Ukraine, it makes no difference because the good, the bad, the ugly is present in every single one of these characters. Every single one.
Yes.
But sometimes when you know why someone is acting in a certain way, it does give you a little bit more understanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we want to point out today. I know that on Twitter over the last couple of days, I've had some interesting comments on some posts that I've made, but some people think we're pro Putin, and I'm not saying that the guy's a good guy, but someone commented in the comments earlier and they mentioned the fact that Putin, as Klaus Schwab has notably given us the information, that Putin is a WEF graduate. And he kind of loosely throws that out there in one of his comments. And here's what I told Derek. I said, it makes no difference. He's either the last holdout of a nationalist playing that role.
Yes.
There's no in between. And does it really matter? Like, I want to believe that he has the right heart, right? And I like Zelensky. There's some things about that Zelensky has done that I believe live. He's got a heart, and he's got, he's got gonads where some of these people don't have any. Sorry if that's crass, but he's the guy standing in the gap. But Jesus said it like this, you guys. He said, I would that you be hot or cold.
Yes.
You stand firmly in what you believe in your why, because it'll be easier for you in that day, because those who tend to walk in the middle, those who switch sides, who are political pole shifters and who use expeditious means means to achieve the out on Ukraine as they need help now, right? So, here's Joe Biden out here. I don't want to say.
Remember, we made them give up their nuclear arms. They had nuclear weapons.
Right.
We made them give them up in 2014 with promises that we would protect the Ukraine.
Yeah,
so
where are we now? So it's just like this guy's, he's in the trenches right now. They're surrounding his, he
may not live through the day.
And he may not live through the day, and he's got his family. So whether you like him or whether you don't like him is irrelevant. Just remember, each one of these players has a good component and an evil component. And that's true with each one of us.
Mm-hmm.
And Jesus, just remember this. He came out to point to hypocrisy over sin.
Over and over.
Hypocrisy is worse than sin. I want that to sink in. Hypocrisy was what Jesus came to call out. So as you watch this and we make some comments, please do not politicize it as far as we are, because we are just watching both sides. We see the good in each one of these characters, and we also see the bad in each one of these. So we're not saying Putin's the good guy, but I certainly understand his why. I understand his why a whole lot. And I'd like to think that he was a nationalist. And I would like to think that he really is trying to perform these strikes in the most expeditious ways possible and the most calculated way possible. But we will never know that.
But we ultimately need to understand that they're good and the bad. That there is, because look, I guarantee you, as we've watched, and when you watch it, anybody that says Putin is evil and yet cannot say that we're evil, it's trouble. It's trouble for you, because you're never going to see it. So if that's where you're at, if you're steadfast on one is evil over the other, or one's more evil, or one is just the less evil, but when you understand the gravity of a country that has a very long ancient history, as opposed to us who are what happened last year. That's it. We don't care about what happened the last 190 years. They do. They care about that stuff. They're old. And they remember, and they have very fond memories of their times. Many people, and I met many people that never left Russia, that loved the Soviet Union. They're like, it was an amazing place. And then there were other people that didn't like it, but for different reasons and at different areas. But there were many, many people that did. Now, if you think that Ukraine is any different with the oligarchs running Ukraine, you're close with them to fire prosecutors so he's not discovered in his money laundering operation. So just know that this country, our country, you have to come to terms with that.
Yeah, you have to see the good and the evil in this country. People who are so politically aligned with the United States that they cannot see beyond this just crazy Trumpism and all of that, no matter how you stand on Trump. I would like to think that he is the good guy that everyone thinks he is. I'd love to believe that. However, what I know about myself and what I know about most all men is that we are this combination of all of it. And I think rightly dividing is exactly that. Jesus said, I did not come to bring peace, but I came to bring a sword. And guess what? That sword rightly divides within each one of us. It divides within us first. That way we can say, oh yeah, I see where I do that. And I see the good and the evil. And then it helps you when you're in judging and when you're judging a situation and you're discerning. So that's what we're here to do. We're trying to bring it back to that level of conversation where we are talking about what was Jesus facing in his day, Derek? He was facing these exact political statements. I challenge each one of you to go back and read the Gospels and look at it through the political lens of what he was in the middle of. And you know what he did? He said, he made an open exposure of the hypocrisy of both sides. And how did he do it? Well, he laid his life. He had to show them what better way. And we're going to see a lot of this. We're going to see many coin of the Russia and the Ukraine event. And hopefully it doesn't escalate beyond that. But we are going to see both sides. So please pay attention to that. We're trained from kids. I was telling Derek this morning, I said, remember when you were a kid and you were watching something on TV and you were like, who are the good guys, mommy? Yeah. Are they the good guys? Because
we just want to know.
We need to know. Isn't it funny? Do you guys remember doing that when you were little? I mean, I did. I mean, I always needed to know, who are these the good guys? Because we only pull for the good guys. But that whole argument is still the wrong tree, because that's the problem. The good will end up being evil sometimes, and then it gets very confusing. And that's why polarizing, like people do politically, can be a death sentence to truth. So we are here to talk about truth.
Yes. And when we go through this, you're going to see the divisions that are created in the Ukraine, political divisions. Look at what we've gone through with this preparation for this. Like I've told you, this color war operation that we're going to be showing you has been conducted on us. It's been conducted on us as well. They are separating us in the exact same way so they can ultimately change the regime. Change it to who? I don't know, the NWA of the NWO one, whatever that one is, or turn us into the future Ukraine, where we are always the center of the money laundering operations, because we're no longer the superpower. We're the ones begging for money. So let's start with this for a minute. Let me just walk you through just a little tiny bit of this.
In recent days, the Maidan, Independence Square, has turned into a full-scale war zone.
More clashes in Ukraine's capital, Kiev.
There is absolutely no doubt that snipers are working here. I've counted 10 bodies.
Мы сегодня не знаем, кто стрелял в людей. Это проблема.
Now on the brink of a civil war, at least 70 dead so far, and the death toll rising.
Эти технологии, еще раз говорю, от них не застраховано ни одно государство.
Did you hear what he just said? See, reread what he just said? He said these techniques, which is we're going to be showing you, these techniques, no country can get past them.
Эти технологии, еще раз говорю, от них не застраховано
No
ни
country
одно
is safe from them.
What we saw here today was a revolution.
Color.
Узнать, что происходило на Украине.
We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals.
Вы знаете, в большой политике, о чем бы ни говорили, все равно будут говорить о деньгах.
Now, I'm just going to let you know, we have to pause this and give comment. Otherwise, this no longer follows under fair use. Okay, so we have to be able to stop this, pause this, and comment or speak over it, so it does abide by that.
Has expanded into 13 countries, up to the borders of Russia. 13 countries.
The focus has to be on not allowing this crisis to turn into hot war between Ukraine and Russia.
Just make note, the mainstream media and the narrative from the U.S. government and basically everybody that is involved as, quote, friends and allies, is all saying the same thing, that this is 100% unprovoked. I'm telling you right now, that is absolute nonsense. Not saying Putin's good, but he was provoked and has been for a very long time.
Эта тема очень опасная. Это тема войны. Сегодня спокойно никто не должен себя чувствовать.
I'll skip the beginning here.
And every time, the Ukraine.
Let's give a little bit of a history here. This is really important.
With a rich history filled with much beauty, heroism, and sacrifice. Ukraine is a borderland, a place where East meets West. This is the flag of Ukraine. The blue represents the sky, the gold its seemingly endless fields of wheat. Ukraine is a prize many have sought, and much blood has spilled in the quest to possess it. Ukraine has been the pathway for Western powers as they attempted to conquer the East.
See, now just that map right there. Look at that map. What did it say? Ukraine has been a path so they can come after the Russian Empire. So the Russian Empire, regardless of whether they were USSR or what you think politically about what their group was, it doesn't matter. Every single time, of course, they're going to call you the good guys over here, the Polish, the French, the Austrian Empire, all of these, they used and needed Ukraine. So it was highly sought after, not to mention it had a lot of natural resources and still does. So keep in mind that map, and it still applies today, which is why Putin has an issue.
Western powers as they attempted to conquer the East in World War I and World War II. And every time, the Ukrainian people ended up paying the highest price for these grand games of power.
By the way, anybody comes into chat and says, you people, like referring to and talking down to the people in this chat, that's the exact type of intimidation and crap that you get with all of this. That's a troll. Mods, block them. I have no interest. This isn't about censorship. This is just about stopping trolls and people that have no interest in seeking truth at all.
History doesn't repeat, but it surely rhymes, said Mark Twain. If one looks closely at the history of Ukraine, one will notice many rhymes. Being surrounded by stronger powers, Ukraine has needed a lot of cunning to survive, and the art they truly mastered with time is the art of changing sides.
Okay.
Treaty
So
of
Derek,
19
stop right there. I think that's a really interesting point that he makes, that they've mastered the art of changing sides. Oh, why would that be? Because they feel threatened on both sides, which is no different than what Vladimir Zelensky said in Munich, is that we're pressed on all sides and we're trying to figure out which one of you guys is lying to us here, because someone's not going to come to our defense.
No, they're not. And see, this is Zelensky. This is why Zelensky said, somebody's lying to me, and give me some guarantees. Give me some guarantees of protection. He gave up his nuclear weapons, which, you have to understand that they gave up their nuclear weapons for what reason? And so this is the strange thing, is that this is where we have to look at Putin and go, is he truly a nationalist? Well, I believe he is. People say he wants to reassemble the USSR. I'm sure he does. He was a KGB agent during the USSR times. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to participate in the world, and he has, and he's actually been, he's
also been in power during all of these times that we're going to be reviewing in this video.
Yes.
So he's been in power consistently during this time period, which I think is very interesting. So he's watched it all
in one way or the other.
In one way or the other.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he, and again, I'm not trying to give props to him over anyone else, but I think that when you see the why, you go, oh, okay, I see. This is just a much more convoluted story, and you really have to pay attention to truth and lying being told on both sides, and the propaganda will fly. So this is where we're rightly dividing, and we're trying to see what's the most logical thing as it compares to scripture, right? Because that's why we're here.
Well, let me, we're going to have to skip ahead here. But again, here's what I do encourage everybody to do. Go and watch this entire thing. Because if you think that Putin is evil and that we're perfect, you watch this, get to the end of it, even if 25% of this is true. But we've looked, and pretty well, this is, the people that have made this, there's not a whole lot of refuting the facts that's stated. And they're giving you great insight into what has taken place and great evidence. We're talking CIA documents, all of this. This is documented. There's a reason why we're experiencing the exact same things now, because it's being conducted on us. You've heard me say in other videos that right now we are experiencing a psychological operation that many special forces have done on behalf of the CIA in the United States in the past and are watching it. And that's why you have this fragmentation in the military as well, our military, which is why we look weak right now. So we're being exposed for what we've done. And this is what Melia brought up earlier today. Scripture that says, Jesus said, if your adversary is taking you to court, go to court with him. Go and settle with him on the way, lest he will extract every penny from you.
It'll cost you less.
It'll cost you less.
With him on the path to this war. And that is, I think, for me personally, now this is my personal opinion, is what Putin wanted. He was trying to force the U.S. To say, we're really never going to let Ukraine be a part of NATO, but they would not do it. And think about that. So, I have a hard time reconciling the U.S. in this. That's just me. I'm a patriot when I should be a patriot. However, when things don't go and they don't line up with what I know to be true, or the attributes of the Father, then I go, no, not gonna sit well with me. So someone just said, could Putin be trying to drive out the cabal? I very definitely think that in his mind, He fully believes that. Yes, I believe that's what he believes. I can go that far.
Yes. By the way, I do know who Brendan O'Connell is. He's been on and off YouTube so many times. I think probably more than anybody.
Yes.
I like him. He's a very, very smart guy. I've tried to speak to him. He's just so abrupt. You could never have a conversation with him. So I do appreciate his work, but he's not somebody that I can have a conversation with. I've tried. And it's not that I disagree with him or agree with him. It's just that he's one of those people that's like, what are you, stupid? You don't see it? If you don't see it, and he's not willing to really explain it, it's just, he's one of those people. But I appreciate him. I do. I really appreciate his work. So thank you for bringing that up. We have to skip ahead a little bit here because we don't want to go for 4 hours tonight and take up all of your time. But Melia, do we have what was the first time?
I think around the 12:50 mark to about 15 minutes. We're talking about the post World War II. I think that kind of brings us closer.
Okay, we'll start here.
War.
Oh yeah, this is
war against the Soviet regime, carrying out 5,000 to 60,000. Bring documents, money, and valuables, and also warm clothing, linen. Any kikes who do not follow this order and are found elsewhere will be shot.
Now I'm sure you know what that word means. Okay.
33,771 Jews were killed in this 2-day operation of the Nazis and Ukrainian militia.
Okay, I have to skip past some of this because I think there might be some inappropriate pictures that YouTube would definitely have an issue with. So let me just skip ahead here.
Ukraine's importance. U.S. intelligence kept a close eye on Ukrainian nationalist organizations as a possible source of counterintelligence against the Soviet Union. CIA documents that just recently have been declassified show strong ties between U.S. intelligence and Ukrainian nationalists since 1946.
Ukrainian nationalists, literally Nazis. Okay, just so you know, the United States has been on the side of these nationalists for this entire time. And anytime one of these nationalists, one of these Nazis, real Nazis, this is where real Nazis live, was no longer in power, well, then there was a color war operation. So this goes to the Russia versus Ukraine within the country. And what they did is they've started wars with the separatists within these countries in the Donbass region and all of these different regions that you're hearing daily on the news today, because this is where these separatists are fighting with the Russian separatists are fighting with these Ukrainian separatists. So you have this battle going on between those that like Russians and those that hate Russians, or those that love Jews and those that hate Jews. Now, there's going to be people that are really pissed off about this, particularly since the United States helped hide people that were involved in just not the Germany Holocaust, but the Ukrainian one. It's crazy.
From the CIA agency report, it is clear that they were not mistaken about the nature of Ukrainian nationalist organizations.
And I didn't get to finish the statement, I don't think. Kiev and Kyiv. Kyiv is the Ukrainian racist Nazis version of it. So now when our people, it's Kyiv, and when it's Russia in power, it'll be Kiev again. Mark my words. It will not be called Kyiv. They will correct that spelling because they hate Russians, but they also hate Jews. They're Nazis.
By himself. According to an OSS report of September 1945, Bandera had earned a fierce reputation for conducting terror during World War II.
Remember that guy's name.
After the Second World War, Bandera and other Ukrainian Nazi leaders fled to Europe, where the CIA helped them hide. The CIA later informed the Immigration and Naturalization Service that it had concealed Stefan Bandera and other Ukrainians from the Soviets. The operations involving Ukrainians continued for many years. The Nuremberg Trials of 1905 and 1946 brought the political, economic, and military leaders of fascist Germany to justice and revealed to the world the monstrous face of Nazism and the crimes they committed. But the Ukrainian Nazis were spared the same fate, and some were even granted indulgences by the CIA. By 1954, the agency excused the illegal activities of the OUN security branch in the name of Cold War necessity. In 1949, Mykola Lebed, the man responsible for the massacres in Volhynia, was moved to the United States, where he died in 1989 without ever being investigated or pursued as a war criminal. The CIA moved to protect Ukrainian nationalist leader Mykola Lebed from criminal investigation by the Immigration and Naturalization Service in 1952. Perhaps Bandera lost his use to the US, or maybe KGB agents outsmarted the CIA. But in 1959, Stepan Bandera, the leader of the Ukrainian nationalists, was killed in Munich, where he was hiding under the name of Stefan Popel. It would be fair to say that Bandera became a major symbol of Ukrainian nationalism by sheer chance, for he was neither its only leader nor its most powerful one.
See, this guy was propped up as something. Listen to that. So they're like, why did this guy become so huge for the country? Because he was propped up. The people. So people are influenced by big types of groups. So in a color war, the U.S. makes somebody a hero. Hello, George Floyd. And then they get all of these people to flood the streets and support them and call them martyrs. Hopefully you got that. So this guy was a prop up, major prop up. Now watch how this takes place.
Dmytro Dontsov was the father of the far-right totalitarian doctrine in Ukraine. Andriy Melnik was the leader of another faction of the OUN. Roman Shuhevich was a general of the Ukrainian insurgent army, and others contributed greatly to the movement. Bandera's dangerous ideology, suppressed by the communist authorities, but supported by external forces, never really died. The seeds of Ukrainian nationalism were passed from generation to generation. Unfortunately, it was just a matter of time before they would once again blossom. In 1954, Ukraine's territory was expanded even more. Khrushchev, the leader of the USSR, and Ukrainian himself, generously gave the Crimean region to Ukraine.
He just gave them Crimea. Okay, now the problem with giving somebody Crimea, when you have to understand, for Ukraine or for Russia, is that in Crimea is their major port for Russians to the Black Sea. So now they gave it to Ukraine and Russia doesn't have it. So the guy was a Ukrainian. So again, this is a war a long time ago and we've gotten involved. And just like we always get involved in everybody's crap, don't we? Everybody, we're always involved. It's the Federal Reserve since 1913, 1914, World War I. And here we are today. Every war, every death is, I mean, literally orchestrated by our banks.
Historians would argue about the legitimacy of this transfer for many years to come. And 60 years after Khrushchev's gift, dramatic new events would take place in Crimea.
The eyes of the world are on Ukraine as the crisis in Crimea continues.
Dozens of heavily armed men seized government buildings in Crimea.
Should Ukraine just shrug its shoulders and say, okay, Crimea, it's lost?
And the old arguments would heat up once again.
Once again.
The Cold War would heat up and cool down by turns, while both rivals were obsessively building up military capacity. The turning point took place when the new era, Perestroika, came to the USSR with its new leader, Mikhail Gorbachev, in the middle of the 1980s. Perestroika meant restructuring towards liberalization and democratization. It certainly had a positive impact on the international situation.
Astonishing news from East Germany, where the East German authorities have said, in essence, that the Berlin Wall doesn't mean anything anymore.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall.
But inside the USSR, the weakening of Kremlin control had different consequences. In Ukraine, a nationalistic political organization, Narodny Ruch, or People's Movement, emerged in 1989 due to this new openness. They advocated for independence of Ukraine from the USSR and became an incubator for leaders of Ukrainian neo-Nazism.
Incubator for neo-Nazis.
In 1991, one of them, Oleg Tyagnybok, founded Svoboda, an openly radical nationalist party preaching the good old principles of Bandera.
Bandera. No, so his language there is obviously fact, right? The language is, it's relevant that this guy is, in fact, he reaches #1 on Israel's anti-Semitic scale.
Purge Ukraine from the Jews and Russians, Ukraine for Ukrainians, and so on. His statements got him 5th place in the Simon Wiesenthal Center Top 10 Anti-Semitic World Leader Rankings of 2012. But also, sadly, attracted numerous followers. Dmitry Yarosh founded another extreme right organization, Trizu, or Trident, in 1994.
Just think Antifa.
In April 2013, Yarosh became an assistant to a member of parliament from the opposition party Udar. Later that same year, he would become the leader of the most radical Ukrainian Nazi group, the Right Sector. Andriy Parubi would soon appear leading a whole army of ultra-nationalist warriors. And the torch marches would once again light up the streets of Ukrainian cities.
Look at that. Marching in Nazi symbolism. Crazy. Yeah, they don't live there.
The world drastically changed in August 1991, when the USSR de facto ceased to exist. The global political map welcomed many newcomers, Ukraine one of them. In modern history, it was the first time Ukraine was truly independent and all on its own.
Not for long.
The red flag came down over the Kremlin tonight as President Gorbachev resigned and brought to an end 7 decades of communist rule in the Soviet Union.
The years after the disintegration of the USSR became known as the Crazy 90s in all the post-Soviet territories.
He's leaving behind 15 independent states which share only a disastrous economy and an uncertain future.
After having been under a government-controlled economy, the free market dramatically changed the rules of the game. New businesses emerged instantly, and the first oligarchs were born overnight. The former country with no class division suddenly became stratified. The chosen few became rich, while the rest had to fight to survive.
Сразу же после получения независимости началась еще более дикая приватизация и растаскивание имущества государственной собственности, понижение жизненного уровня населения сразу же после получения независимости. И причем, какие бы власти не меняли друг друга, для жизни рядового гражданина ничего не меняло. Там происходил просто
It was consistent with robbery of the Ukrainian people.
Oligarchs took over. Грабеж украинского народа. И, конечно, люди уже устали от этого произвола, от этой совершенно сумасшедшей коррупции.
The people's growing discontent made Ukraine more vulnerable to outside forces, and a new kind of warfare was launched, one not known before, the color revolutions.
Demonstrators clashed with police.
Now watch.
Thousands protesting the results of the election and calling for a new vote.
Sound familiar?
You had 2 color revolutions in its 24 years of independence. In 2004, crowds of people descended upon Kiev, marking the start of the Orange Revolution. At that time, Ukraine became once again a battlefield of 2 forces.
Now you see the colors of the flags. So this is where you can see the symbolism and where the color wars are actually operating. So there was dispute over the election. The election was stolen, and then a massive group was convinced to come out and have a color, I don't know, or maybe a letter like Q. So understand that the psychological operations that seem so real, and they're giving you all of this information. They're leading people into it. That operation, this is exactly what took place with January 6th. Same exact thing. You're watching this play out.
The Russian and Western governments. The culmination of this conflict took place during the presidential elections in November.
It gets much worse. Watch this.
The 2 major candidates, Western-backed Viktor Yushchenko and Russian-leaning Viktor Yanukovych, almost equally shared the votes of Ukrainians. By
That's
the way,
familiar.
calling Viktor Yushchenko Western-backed is not an exaggeration. His wife, Katerina Yushchenko, is a former U.S. State Department official and worked in the White House during the Reagan administration. The division was along geographic lines. Traditionally, Russian Eastern Ukraine voted for Yanukovych, while Western Ukraine chose Yushchenko. By the announced result, Viktor Yushchenko lost to Viktor Yanukovych, but thousands of people didn't agree with it, and they came to the central square of Kiev on the 22nd of November.
Here they came.
The situation received wide news coverage.
The country's
And notice he called it Kiev.
election commission ignored reports of fraud, declaring Kremlin-backed Viktor Yanukovych the winner.
International politicians, such as former General Secretary of NATO, Javier Solana, became frequent guests in Kiev, initiating negotiations between parties.
And I hope very much that with the will of everybody, we will be able to overcome this difficulty.
The results of the negotiations, however, were often reached only on paper. Thus, Yushchenko never told the supporters to stop blocking government buildings in central Kiev. Therefore, these non-violent and very orange protests lasted for a month, during which time the previous election results were annulled, marred by massive corruption, and new elections were announced. An important nuance: just 3 months before, Viktor Yushchenko became a victim to a mysterious and still unsolved poisoning. But it didn't prevent him from winning in the new election. Though, as we shall soon see, there was much more than just the people's will that led to this victory. This peaceful revolution and its leader were warmly welcomed by the international community. But the euphoria didn't last long. Yushchenko's government completely failed with reforms and lost its chance to establish democracy, instead descending into infighting. Viktor Yushchenko was not re-elected for a second term, but at the end of his presidency, he had the time to make one last gift to his supporters from Western Ukraine.
Listen.
На завершення я хочу сказати про те, що чекали мільйони українських патріотів і багато років. Я підписав указ
I signed a decree
за незламність духу, відстоювані національні ідеї, виявлені героїзм і самопожертву в боротьбі за
order the state of Stepan Bandera,
постановляю присвоїти звання
making him the hero.
України з удостоєнням ордена держави Бандері Степану Андрійовичу. Слава Україні!
The hero status of Stepan Bandera was short-lived. In 2010, Viktor Yanukovych was elected president.
So Yanukovych was elected president after this guy who made Bandera a hero.
Right.
Right. And he immediately, and they raise up all of these things for him, these statues and stuff, and make him this national symbol. But he was literally a Nazi. So this guy comes in and says, and a Nazi that hates Russians and Jews. So this guy comes in and says, no, he's no longer a hero, causing yet another war.
Yeah, I wanted to just pipe in here. Ukraine's Zelensky, it just came up on a tweet, Derek, and this is so relevant because it's just like watching this. He said, quote, "Today, I asked the 27 leaders of Europe whether Ukraine will be in NATO. I asked directly. Everyone is afraid, does not answer.
Nope.
And we are not afraid. We are not afraid of anything.
Nope.
So give this guy some props for standing up. But see, you can easily see how these radical groups are utilized by the CIA and other NATO agencies to come in and promote their ideology. And that's what he was trying to point out. You're using us on both sides. You're trying to polarize us. Oh, how does that sound familiar? Polarizing us against each other. And that's what we see right now going on. It's the never-ending story of the serpent chasing its tail. And in the good and evil change places, and you're constantly trying to find the good. And that's the problem. People cannot untangle this mess.
No.
Because it's so convoluted. And this is why, again, Pontius Pilate, what is truth? What is the truth? We're so used to lying, we no longer can tell the truth.
Don't even know it anymore.
From a lie. And that's exactly where we are now. It's exactly where Jesus was then.
Yes. Now, follow this for a minute. And that's why I love her. She just comes in. She's always going to bring it back to Jesus.
Always.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be the Jesus turning the tables over. She's going to be the one. Although I believe that she's got some tables to overturn.
The international community.
But now remember, the last president that made the hero, the Nazi, a hero for the country. Watch who loves him. See, this is what you have to understand. You're like, no, we don't support the Nazis in Ukraine. Are you kidding me? Every single one of them that pops up, he's a hero. Many of them live here. We've given them asylum after Russia takes them back out again. Russia has been fighting with the U.S. We've been at war with the U.S. Period. We've been at war with the U.S. That's what Putin says. Constantly. This is not new for him.
Community had no doubts about the legitimacy of the elections. In January 2011, Viktor Yanukovych repealed the hero title of Bandera. Almost 4 years into his presidency, though, another revolution shook Ukraine. Unfortunately, this one was anything but peaceful.
Mr. Yanukovych, I'm an American. I'm an outsider to this.
These are great interviews.
And it's very complicated.
And he interviews Putin.
But I would like, as a filmmaker, just to jump into the action and go to those moments in November 2013. You're president of the Ukraine. You've been president for 3 years at this point. The country is in bad economic shape, very bad. You have a trade agreement with Russia, and now you're seeking to make a better agreement with the EU, with the European Union, and you are negotiating. Can you bring me to that moment and what you're thinking?
Действительно, это был очень сложный период времени для Украины, и нам нужно было найти решение проблем в 2013 году. Поэтому у нас было два партнера. Прежде всего, мы рассчитывали на Международный валютный фонд.
The IMF?
Но Международный валютный фонд на протяжении года, когда мы...
So keep in mind, his country was getting money because the last president had established an agreement with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. And so now he's president. He's got to try to figure out what he's doing now. And he's got the IMF. Now, keep this in mind. The IMF will not give you money if you're in active war. So the Ukraine couldn't be in active war with Russia. They had to have these proxy wars that are inside of Russia. This is where you have the Ukraine separatists and the Russian separatists. So it's just separatists fighting each other, although they're military. So just follow along here.
Вели переговоры. Нам предлагал неприемлемые для нас варианты решений. Значительное поднятие тарифов для населения, прежде всего на энергоносители и на газ, то есть значительный рост расходов населения, при том, что доходы оставались прежние.
Sound familiar?
Мы на это не пошли. Мы предложили другие варианты решения вопросов. Мы получили официальный отказ Международного валютного фонда в ноябре 2013 года. Оставалась Россия. Россия нам сказала, что мы готовы с вами работать как партнеры, если вы учтете наши интересы.
Того, что экономика Украины и России зарождалась как единая экономика, сложились абсолютно уникальные, особые экономические отношения. Рынки в России были полностью открыты для украинских товаров, а при этом наши границы с Украиной таможенные полностью раскрыты. Таким образом, Евросоюз как бы заходил со всеми своими товарами на нашу территорию без всяких переговоров.
Yep.
И когда мы начали считать балансы, мы увидели, что соглашение, которое подготовлено Европой для Украины, требует больших экономических расходов, компенсаций потерь, а Европа компенсаций не предлагает. При том, что российский рынок при этом для Украины частично или прокрывался.
Сказали, конечно, если Украина решила так поступить, это ее выбор, и мы уважаем этот выбор. Но мы не должны этот выбор оплачивать.
Наши переговоры с Европой не увенчались успехом.
They couldn't get
Поэтому
into the
на
EU.
этом пути мы предложили сделать паузу.
They would not be allowed into the EU. So they were essentially blocked to go into the EU.
Violent clashes erupted in the Ukrainian capital Kiev as more than 100,000 people protested against
Because he couldn't make a deal with the EU that would have made him comfortable. Because the EU comes along with ties of NATO.
a government decision to delay an association deal with the EU.
Vitaly, you were Minister of Interior Affairs for the Ukraine during this period, and you were Chief of Police, essentially, of the country. Can you tell me your version of what happened from November protests through February protests?
Мы располагали информацией, что протестные акции в любом случае массово планируются и начнутся в 2015 году. Но оппозиция воспользовалась тем фактом, что в начале кабинет министров, а затем и президент приняли решение временно отложить подписание ассоциации с Европейским Союзом.
Arseny Yatsenyuk, leader of the opposition party, Fatherland. Oleg Tagnibok, leader of the opposition nationalist far-right political party, Svoboda. Vitaly Klitschko, leader of the opposition party, Udar.
Both EU and Ukrainian officials said on Thursday the suspension of talks on closer ties could be revived after the two-day meeting. But officials said the deal was off the table for now.
Expected more.
Look. I want you to hear me.
Protests on the streets of Kiev enter their second day. The crowd of around 1,000 protesters were joined by the leader of the opposition, the reigning world boxing champion Vitaly Klitschko. He called on the demonstrators to maintain pressure on the government after it decided not to sign a major trade deal with the EU.
These are the peaceful protests.
You go back to Kiev
the ones that aren't so peaceful.
Next day after the meeting with Merkel, and protests are up. Am I right? Can you take me through that period?
Если у меня в самом начале было понимание того, что это мирные акции, и во время мирных акций можно вести диалог, и я к этому был готов. Говоря о протестах ноября-февраля, необходимо обязательно учитывать динамику их развития, которая происходила на Украине заранее до того. Огромное количество общественных организаций, которые финансировались из-за рубежа.
A number of NGOs. NGOs are non-governmental organizations. However, most of the time they're always financed and run by the governments, but they're not a government organization, so there's no oversight. They can do whatever they want, really.
Огромное количество журналистов, работающих на гранты.
Robert Perry is a longtime investigative journalist
who's
based
dead
in Washington, D.C., best known for his major disclosures about the Iran-Contra scandal in the 1980s.
He disclosed the Iran-Contra scandal in the 80s, and he's the late. They say he's now late. He's dead. So, well, there you go.
He's the founder of Consortium News, where he has reported extensively on the crisis in Ukraine and the forces behind the unrest.
An NGO is a non-governmental organization. Now, many NGOs are quite legitimate.
Oh, I'm a posit there.
They represent good causes. Maybe they help people in a country feed or water problems or deal with various kinds of social problems. But there are some NGOs that have become funded by government entities and serve more the purpose of that government rather than trying to serve the people that they are ostensibly working for. One thing we saw in the 1980s, at that point, the Central Intelligence Agency had been largely discredited because of scandals that had been exposed in the 1970s.
For 15 years, the CIA has secretly financed overseas activities of the National Students Association. But then there came to light a fantastic web of CIA penetrations.
So when the Reagan administration came in, there was this concept that instead of having the CIA, which traditionally would go into these different target countries, funding their media, funding NGOs, funding different political operations, that was essentially farmed out to a new organization called the National Endowment for Democracy, which was created in 1983. And it would do pretty much what the agency used to do. It would go into one of these countries and it would support various political groups, train activists, deal with journalists, business groups, and try to advance U.S. foreign policy interests, sometimes against the interests of the host government, the target government. And beyond that, they received financial and other logistical help from the National Endowment for Democracy and other U.S. agencies.
National Endowment for Democracy. That George Soros guy.
That helped them training activists, working with journalists to get their side presented more favorably. They work on things like, how do you get traction? How do you get things to go viral? How do you then use that to generate support for your cause?
And support was generated. Mustafa Nayyem, a founder of one of Ukraine's new media outlets.
Here you go.
Hromadske TV, knew very well how to make something go viral. It was his notorious Facebook post on November 21st, 2013, that brought the first crowds to Maidan.
See, now, I don't want to make this guy a bad guy, because many people, like myself, like Melia, like you want to go out and you protest something. The reality, and just as I start talking about, the reality is these protests and these people get usurped. George Floyd had no intention of doing what happened. Zero intention to be involved in that. He wasn't some operative. They usurp it, like the guy that they made a hero in Ukraine, the separatist.
And they use symbolism, polarization. They find these extremist groups and they infiltrate those extremist groups and then make a bad name for everyone. And, it's really sad. I mean, it's sad to see that people don't stand it. Like, I know one of my daughters has been a protester in the last couple of years, and I've talked her through it, and I'm proud of her for standing up for what she believes in, but trying to show her the larger truths of how things get misused has been a challenge, because I think this younger generation just has lost this ability to ask questions. And I'm not sure why that is. I'm sure, well, I do know it's the media. Right.
Yeah.
It's social media and media being usurped, and
influencers
and
influencers. Right. So
yes,
podcasters, people like us, they can use us. This is where I'm always trying to be aware of. Are they pushing us into something? Are they moving a certain sect of people? I watched it happen with QAnon.
Yeah.
Right away. You watched it be usurped. So I believe it began with something that was homogenous and instantly taken over. I watched it happen with Occupy Wall Street and Anonymous is very much part of these color wars. Anonymous participated in them without knowing.
Well, look at the kid that's been hacking the Canadian truckers. Remember, what's his name, Derek? You said you knew who he was.
Yeah.
Half the
Katani.
Katani.
Yeah.
Half of these Anons now have been recruited by the CIA to
do
and they started out being so good and exposing stuff. It's like, how does that happen? I guess everyone has a price, huh?
It's incredible. No, not everybody has a price, but most everybody has so they have a situation. So if they can't be bought, then they get manipulated, and they get used in different ways. So they'll funnel you, they'll push your agenda going on. And this is why you have to question when there is somebody that has 1.5 million followers or 4.5 million followers or 5.5 million followers on YouTube. I'm not saying any of them are bad, but why do they have so many followers when YouTube is working so hard to keep people down and only have mainstream people? Well, it has to do with money, but there's an agenda there.
That's right.
There's an agenda that whether or not they know it or not. So this is at what point can a Glenn Beck get used? What point can a Russell Brand get manipulated and used? At what point can anybody get used, because they'll start pushing your agenda or what you're talking about and making it bigger. And then they flip
the script,
and then they flip the script on everybody. And then next thing you know, you've organized a peaceful protest, but you're going to prison for an insurrection because insurrectionists that were agents went in there and started it, and they came out and arrested you. This is exactly what's taken place in Ukraine. Make no mistake about this. This is why we thought it was important to talk about this today, regardless of still being sick, because we feel like crap. So, but let's keep watching this, because I'm telling you, this will infuriate you, but it also should give you peace, just so you know, and you can stop believing in the people that run these things. If anybody wants to do anything about this, you just have to realize that you don't know who the operative is.
Derek,
it is not left or right.
Let's so that we're not boring everybody, and we don't want to overuse this video because we certainly want folks to go back and watch the whole entire video, because you could watch it 3 or 4 times. Jump ahead to the 43 mark, because this is where we're talking about how these folks come in and then they demonize the other party, and how that is used, and how George Soros got involved in this, and how the Dutch and the US came in and set up these foundations to donate money to these organizations in the Ukraine.
Okay, so I'm going to start it actually at 41, because he's talking about techniques launched at this time were planned well in advance. So this is the Russian version, the Russian president of Ukraine, the one that is trying to work with Russia, but was also trying to negotiate a deal with the EU. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be a good leader.
Технологии, которые применялись в тот период времени, они были заранее спланированы.
Money media
as
techniques.
veiled and masked as the color revolutions can be, an attentive viewer can see subtle patterns and similarities revealing their true nature.
Hold on, I'll pause this. Okay, pause it, because I went out and I wanted you to see these flyers. Now, this is what I'm saying. Anonymous used flyers just like this during the uprising of Egypt. I was part of that. So I can tell you that things get usurped. The exact same flyers.
As one obedient group, they have to be united at the unconscious level. The masterminds of color revolutions know this well and have perfected the art.
Martyrs. Symbols look familiar. Watch.
Symbolism is one of the most powerful tools to achieve this end. Revolutionary political organizations with surprisingly similar names and even more similar logos have appeared time and again, almost as omens marking the countries that would be hit by the colored plague next. They are often described as being aware and active, when they're actually trained and radical. They are the ones who take the first shot, literal and metaphorical, to transform the peaceful protest.
Hold on. I pause this. When it goes out on here, I'm pausing it and then restarting it so we're not missing anything. It's really giving me a lot of disruptions right now. So just until that comes back, I'm going to wait until the internet pipes up a little bit before I start this again. Because right now I'm looking at a really, really weak signal going out. But see, I've got one good on YouTube. I'm sorry, folks, that we're just powering through this until it gets fixed. They're not coming until tomorrow. So I've been trying to deal with this. So I'm going to keep playing. Hopefully this looks a little better.
Tests into full-blown coup d'etats. Their fingerprints can be found everywhere on the map.
Keeps going out.
Of the color revolutions. Using all the experience of past generations, simple but effective tools like catchy sing-alongs and chanting.
Now wait till you see who's involved in this.
Well known for exciting the crowd and creating a group identity, they depersonalize individuals and make them easier to manipulate.
Depersonalize.
Конечно, без денег здесь не могло быть. Такое количество не государственных, различных общественных организаций, грантов, которое выделялось на Украину, это не есть секретом.
Incidentally, one such organization, Hromadske TV, received generous donations from the Dutch and U.S. embassies.
How rare, how rare.
As well as...
And people bitch about RT television.
It's from the Renaissance Foundation, an NGO founded by George Soros.
I set up a foundation in Ukraine before Ukraine became independent of Russia. And the foundation has been functioning ever since.
Look at that. Y'all know who that guy is, right?
Mm-hmm. And it played an important part in events now.
Oddly enough, he's a Jew that is responsible for handing over Jews to who?
To the Nazis.
To the Nazis.
Because it was politically expedient. It saved his life,
It saved his life. So now he supports the Nazis because they saved his life. This guy, oh man.
I like criticism, but it must be my way.
Did you see any evidence of U.S. involvement? Did you feel their presence from the U.S.?
Очень частыми гостями были представители Соединенных Штатов, конгрессмены, были госпожа Нуланд приезжала очень часто.
Just as we start talking about this, Victoria Nuland. So we'll keep her name, and you can look it up. But yeah, she's quite involved in this. But again, she's just a puppet too.
У нас были с ней дискуссии, но после этих дискуссий она шла на Майдан и поддерживала протестующих. И обвиняла правоохранительные органы, применялась чрезмерно сила. На самом деле эти все месседжи мы видели на Майдане.
We will be back here on this square to celebrate with you.
Do you see who was there? Did you guys see the familiar face right there? Right there. Hold on, right here.
Эти все месседжи
we saw all these messages.
На Майдане.
Look, you got John McCain right here. This is another U.S. senator from Connecticut.
We'll be back here on this square to celebrate with you, a Ukraine that stands with Europe and stands with the United States.
Well, members of Congress were visiting Ukraine during that period, most famously Congressman John McCain. So some of the people who were challenging their government, their elected government at that point, were being told by the senior U.S. official, a person who ran for president and a official in U.S. Congress, that the U.S. was with them.
I'm Senator John McCain, and it's always a pleasure to be back in Ukraine.
Senator McCain was, in a sense, giving the people in the Maidan a feeling that they had the backing of the most powerful country on earth.
This is about the future you want for your country. This is about the future you deserve.
Делегаций много приезжало. Я говорил, что нельзя говорить, во-первых, неправду. Нельзя становиться на сторону митингующих.
And this is the future they deserved, Derek. So the future, we're giving you the future you deserve. Now look at there's that carrot that the enemy always throws out there. You're going to have a better future. Look, go this way. And now you've got Zelensky tweeting out, I just need some assurance that you're going to let me in NATO or somebody's going to have my back here.
Yeah. And keep in mind, see, they want this battle with Russia. Trust me. This is what I'm saying. Zelensky is saying, just give me the guarantees. Now, if you recall, we could have avoided this if we had guaranteed and promised Putin that Ukraine would not become part of NATO, because the minute that they become part of NATO, well, now we can put all sorts of military missiles and call them defensive systems, but all of them are a threat to Russia because they're coming after Russia. He's been on their target list. I mean, look at the Russia, Hillary Clinton, all this crap. Are you kidding me? These people are the Nazis. You got to understand who in our government are Nazis and supporting them. Now, I am sure that Israel isn't happy about this. You think?
Can't imagine.
Payback time. That's the way they're looking at this. Payback time.
Их права, создавая тем самым и углубляя конфликт. Когда митингующие захватывают правительственные здания и учреждения, скажите, допустимо ли это в любой другой стране, например, чтобы посол Украины пришел к митингующим в Фергюсоне и раздавал там пряники или пирожки и обвинял полицейских Соединенных Штатов Америки? Я считаю, что это недопустимо ни в одной европейской стране.
Yeah, it would be unacceptable in any country. And by the way, you know, when we talk about he goes in and takes some land unprovoked, and he takes some land that isn't his, this country has done that more than any country on earth. And supports Israel doing it too. So there's that.
Почему к Украине было такое отношение?
Who was your highest level contact with the U.S. government in this period?
Я постоянно...
Who was the highest level contact in the U.S. government? My high level contact was Vice President Biden.
Имел контакт с господином Байденом.
Just want to make sure. Did you all hear that? That YouTube didn't cut us out? Do you hear that? Is this thing on?
Вице-президентом. Часто с ним телефонные переговоры. Но дело в том, что господин Байден говорил одно, а в Украине делали другое.
And the U.S. ambassador?
Посол Соединенных Штатов в Украине постоянно принимал представителей Майдана у себя в посольстве. Мы это очень хорошо знали, мы это отслеживали, и создавалось такое впечатление, что...
Look at that. The headquarters in charge of the whole process was in the U.S. Embassy. So is Putin unreasonable when he says that we're a threat to him through Ukraine?
Not at all.
Seriously, people.
В посольстве Соединенных Штатов существует штаб, который управляет этим процессом.
In early February of 2014, as the Maidan crisis was getting more violent, there was a phone call that was intercepted. It was a call between the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs,
this is juicy,
Victoria Nuland, and the U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Jeffrey Pyatt.
Questions of credibility are being raised after a private chat between two top U.S. diplomats was leaked online.
I think Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, the governing experience.
Oddly enough, this was February 2014.
And he's the guy, you know, what he needs is Klitsch and Tony Book on the outside. I just think Klitsch going in, he's going to be at that level working for Yatsenyuk. It's just not going to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Okay. Good. Well, do you want us to try to set up a call with him as the next step?
Sullivan's come back to me, VFR, saying...
See, these people have like PowerPoints for this crap. Oh, yeah, no, it's going to be him. All of this crap and all of the fighting between people and the beatings on the street and murders and war and all of this stuff. These people are talking about it like they're organizing a new social media app.
You need Biden, and I said probably tomorrow for an attaboy and to get the deets to stick. So
Okay.
Biden's willing.
So you had this remarkable phone call where you have these two senior officials of the U.S. government apparently talking about a coup or how they were planning to restructure the government of Ukraine.
Fuck the EU.
No, exactly.
I'm not saying the whole U.S. government feels that way. There is division on this, but the neoconservative element wants very much to change the strategic dynamic in Eastern Europe. The neocons are very smart people, and they've been at this for a long time. They came in around the issue of propaganda.
It's crazy. It's the neocons pushing it on the one side, but it's actually the Democrats doing it and executing it on the other side. It's 2014 when Vice President was doing this. Obama, this is the whole Crimea crisis, right? Obama was president when they gave up part of that. Nothing happened. Now here we are, and nothing's happening. Oh, a bunch of sanctions, but there's much more to this.
They studied how to create hot buttons for the American people. They had this experience when they were getting the American people to get excited about Central America back in the 1980s.
Sandinista regular army. The ground force is being equipped now with Russian artillery.
And they've been applying those same strategies ever since. They remain very dedicated to achieving their goals. They still want to get rid of certain governments. They wanted regime change in Syria, for instance, regime change.
Regime change in Syria? Sound familiar? What are we dealing with right now? What's happening in Syria? Israel's bombing it. Yes. Anything? Anyone? Bueller?
Iran. They're very skilled at this, and they have a lot of allies now inside the news media, inside the government, and that means that they can do a lot to control the narrative of any story.
I think in America these days, we have somehow told ourselves that there are a lot of ways of dealing with these problems other than hard power. Vladimir Putin cares about hard power.
The neoconservatives can now demonize a leader of a country. That sells with the American people. So you don't just sort of argue a policy. You attack the leader. So the neoconservatives became very skilled at picking out leaders, finding their ugly traits, and then highlighting them. Yanukovych,
cancel culture.
You might say was a rather clunky political leader, but you make him into a devil. He's totally corrupt and he's evil and he wants to kill people in the Maidan, these wonderful white-hatted demonstrators. So you've got a black hat versus white hat. You keep repeating that basic scenario, and it works with the American people.
You've got to realize what Vladimir Putin is. He's an old KGB colonel that wants to restore the Russian Empire.
You make them into demons, and the American people find that the way they can understand the world. Once that happens, it's very difficult for a journalist or anyone else to say, hold it, that guy, he's got more of a gray hat than a white hat or a black hat. And if you say that, you're a Yanukovych apologist or you're a Putin apologist, and then the attacks come on to the person saying it, the journalist, the academic, or whoever.
That happens every day now, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many of you been called Trumpers or whatever if you oppose Biden? Because just because I might oppose Biden doesn't necessarily mean I support Trump.
Exactly.
But you are going to be categorized in that way. And they've trained us to do that. The CIA, they've trained our populace to do that. Someone just asked a really good question. Melia, why is it that people don't see it? And Derek, I want you to answer that. But all I can say is that it's willful ignorance because we just want to build back better and go back to normal.
Everything that we are being told in this country right now, like I said, this country is a victim. All of you, every single body is a victim of these color wars and this separation. They are creating this exact same separation. Russians versus Ukrainians, MAGA versus non-MAGA, vaxxed versus non-vaxxed. All of this are color wars. They are separating the people on political lines, and they are going to bring them together. This is their goal. This is what they do. And it's odd because people have a difficult time thinking, well, why would this country try to take down our own country? Let me tell you something. If you had debt, and if you haven't watched the Glenn Beck piece where he's talking about the actual debt of the Federal Reserve, it's terrifying. On stated liabilities, we have $3 trillion or more in debt. We have spent hundreds and hundreds of trillions propping up governments and systems around the world. We are basically owning everything. We have so much debt. How do you get rid of that debt? Well, if the person dies that has debt, they're no longer in debt. If the country that has the debt dies and goes away, well, all of that money that got separated, it was just a massive money laundering operation to put it in everybody else's hands and destroy this country. This is why the whore of Babylon is the whore of Babylon. When you're done and she's all used up, this is what they're doing. You got to get rid of her. Got to get her out of here. She's no longer useful. iPet Goat, the little granny in the room, remember that? That's the whore of Babylon.
Any good director will tell you that tempo and rhythm are the most essential components to hold an audience's attention.
Сама технология, которая применялась Майданом, состояла в необходимости сакральных жертв. Это часть технологии.
It can also be called a method of betrayal, when the allies and followers are relentlessly thrown into the revolutionary flame.
Yep.
The idea is simple.
And then they'll show your blood.
When the preparation work is done, the trigger just needs to be pulled to set the machine into full motion.
Yep.
The murder of politician Rafiq Hariri led to the Cedar Revolution. Looking back at the mysterious poisoning of Viktor Yushchenko right before the Orange Revolution of 2004, we see now that he became a sacred victim himself.
Yep.
Most political analysts believe the compassion of the Ukrainian people at that moment tilted the scales, giving him the presidency. The number of victims among the protesters during Euromaidan totaled over 100. They are called the Heavenly 100.
100 people at one protest. So we didn't even have that here. But this happens, and it will happen more often here. They're doing it. They're going to do it. The only thing that saved it is the peaceful aspects of like the Canadian convoy and now the American convoy. They really do mean peace. And when people get into their faces and they're not allowing themselves to be antagonized. But that doesn't mean that operatives aren't going to do the nasty business and make it look like you.
The sacred victims were immediately mythologized. The beating of students on November 30th, 2013 was the obvious trigger of Euromaidan. Those who sent trained provocateurs to the square very well realized that peaceful protesters were the ones who would get hurt the most.
Yep. Now they're getting smarter.
It's hard to keep protests going for months on end. Tensions subside, and people inevitably get tired. Holidays are also a big danger for revolutionary masterminds. People want to be home with their families and friends, and one needs to get inventive to keep people in a cold tent city.
Entertainment. Or entrainment.
When she was cruelly beaten by
And here's another person. So
residence of Viktor Yanukovych.
this was a journalist that they took, and she got beaten. So they just organized it and had these people beat her and then say that they caught him. And then she became this revolutionary person.
For no results. Now, it is widely believed that Nigoyan's murder was staged by provocateurs.
Hold on, let's go back to
heavily
the
filmed at that time.
Oh, this is really interesting. So here's George Floyd.
Harov was killed during the attack.
Let me just go back this up. This guy comes up and he becomes this hero. He's the George Floyd of this event.
1 month later,
And January
time
22nd.
for another act in the play came.
2-2.
Armenian-Ukrainian protester Sergei Nigoyan was one of the first to arrive at Maidan. He wasn't radical or violent, but instead naive and full of hope.
Sweet guy.
Watching Sergei read a patriotic poem is like watching a casting tape for the role of a sacred victim.
Борітеся, поборете, вам Бог помагає. За вас правда, за вас слава і воля святая.
Unfortunately, Sergei got the part. Betrayed by his brothers in arms, this video would eventually go viral after Sergei was killed early in the morning of January 22nd, 2014.
He was killed.
The circumstances of his death remain unknown to this day. Even though the whole area of protests was heavily filmed at that time, there were no records or witnesses to help the investigation, and his body was moved immediately from the scene of the crime. Sergei became the first killed martyr of Euromaidan, and in a heartbeat, the police officers were appointed as his killers.
Yep.
Almost 2 years later, the official investigation would still deliver no results. Now, it is widely believed that Nigoyan's murder was staged by provocateurs to escalate the conflict. God speaks to people with the language of signs. On January 26, 2014,
Watch this.
Pope Francis prayed for Ukraine, addressing thousands of people at St. Peter's Square in Vatican City.
Et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
After the prayer, 2 white doves were released from the papal window and were immediately attacked by a crow and seagull. Those who understand the language could easily read the meaning of this omen. Soon, great forces, the seagull and the crow, would be tearing apart 2 Slavic nations, the white doves. This omen gave hope to the Ukraine, saying that by God's will, the doves would be saved. But it also predicted severe hardship and many victims. The events which could enter into the history of the color revolutions as the most massive human sacrifice yet arrived right on schedule.
2-2 yet again, all about Ukraine. And this was on 2-2 and 2-2-2-2 and all the twos that Biden giving a speech at 2:22. And last year saying on February 21st that I could stand up to Putin. And that was in 2020.
For weeks, this European capital has been the scene of a violent uprising. Today, the bloodiest day yet.
The protesters are pushing up towards the government district, armed here with Molotov cocktails, but we saw handguns and shotguns too. There are casualties on both sides.
Well, she's just said that there are 6 dead people up there, not just injured, dead. They said they've been hit by snipers.
20-го начали расстреливать сотрудников милиции.
Я получил информацию, что начали стрелять снайперы.
Snipers started
И
shooting.
есть жертвы с 2 сторон.
Casualties on the cop side and the protesters.
Консерватория. Откуда прозвучали
conservatory.
то, что было под контролем у сил Майдана.
And here again, we meet our old acquaintance from Narodny Ruch, Andriy Parubi, who was at the peak of his glory as self-proclaimed commandant of Maidan, which basically means the leader of the radical opposition.
They sacrifice their own people. Everybody does on all sides. Scapegoats. False flags require dead people.
Ми попередили їх про те, що Майдан може вдатись до більш дій, якщо в найближчі дні ми не побачимо виконання наших вимог.
В том, чтобы посеять хаос, но Янукович точно не был заинтересован в том, чтобы хаос разрастался.
The protesters were filmed leading a long line of riot police away. It's not clear where they were taking them. 67 officers are current to be missing.
14 policemen dead and 43 wounded.
Было погибших 20 человек и более 150 раненых огнестрельными ранениями.
Тогда уже было понятно, 20-21 февраля, что начался вооруженный переворот.
Earlier, from inside the protest.
So the message from Putin going in on 2/22/2022, and the message from Biden in response to 22 is, "I got you, I know you." So he is going toe to toe with Biden, with Putin. I just tell you right now, I think he's underestimating the guy.
Camp, the opposition leader Vitaly Klitschko urged his supporters to stay put.
But see, keep this real reason why that we can't go in and all of this stuff is because right now Putin and this administration is forced to expose that they are supporting the separatists. That's why the media is never talking about this. If you looked at Putin's statement, he said, let me let it till this comes back. If you look at Putin's statement, he said that he was demilitarizing the Ukraine and, more importantly, denazifying it.
I think he sees himself as liberating the Ukraine in once and for all. I mean, I know that could be a stretch. He's either, like we said before, he's either a true nationalist in the last holdout of the New World Order against the New World Order, or he's playing that part well. So either way, this is just the take on it, right? So we don't know that that's the truth. That's what it seems to be if you're a logical thinking person and you're watching this and you're looking at this documentary. So, only time will tell.
So pay attention to this.
I think it's at the 110 mark, Derek, you can probably jump to, because it's where Putin talks about NATO not being able to resist the pressure of the USA.
Yes, and that was 110?
About 110, yeah.
Okay, so let's just look
You go to the
back.
1 minute mark.
We'll go to 108.
Как выясняется воля народа?
How can we find the will of the
В
people?
современном мире с помощью голосования. Люди пришли, свыше 90%. И свыше 90% проголосовали за присоединение к России.
And they voted in favor of joining
Нужно
Russia?
уважать выбор людей. Не подстраивать каждый раз под свои геополитические интересы, международное право и принципы демократии. У нас не было там никаких боевых действий. Там никто никого не убивал.
What is described in the West as a Russian invasion of Crimea is, in fact, the presence of Russian soldiers in Crimea. Can you clarify that?
Российские солдаты в Крыму, как говорят, были испокон веков. Потому что база Черноморского флота была в Крыму.
See, how crazy is that? They said that, crazy is it that they said that Russia in 2014 had taken Crimea. That was a false flag event. They were showing soldiers, but they had actually done it. But they said that there were Russian soldiers, and they used the fact that there were Russian soldiers in Crimea. But there's always been Russian soldiers in Crimea. That's where the fleet is.
As long ago as 1804,
1804.
Sevastopol's naval base became the main military port of the Russian Empire on the Black Sea. During the Second World War, the heroic defense of Sevastopol lasted almost a year and took hundreds of thousands of lives. Therefore, the naval base in Crimea has a legacy of historical pride for the Russian Black Sea Fleet, as well as being of huge strategic importance.
Those of us alive back then remember when there were Soviet missiles put into Cuba, how frightened Americans were and how angry, and how we almost went to a nuclear confrontation over having weapons of that kind of destruction placed that close to the United States.
If the United States considers Cuba to be in its backyard, then Crimea lays at Russia's doorstep.
The consequences of a U.S. Seizure of the base or a NATO base?
Очень тяжелые.
Grave
Потому
consequences.
что сама по себе база ничего не значит. Но вот чтобы я хотел отметить один нюанс. Почему мы так остро реагируем на расширение НАТО? Нас беспокоит практика принятия решений. Я знаю, как принимаются. Когда страна становится...
See, Putin is no dummy. He said, I know how these decisions get made in NATO. I know these decisions. And I know exactly what it means. And I know how it comes about. I know what bringing NATO into this country means for Russia. I've been battling them to prevent it.
членом НАТО, ей уже очень трудно сопротивляться давлению со стороны такой крупной...
It can't resist the pressure of the U.S.
И там легко может появиться все, что угодно. Система противоракетной обороны, и новые базы, и, если потребуется, и новые ударные комплексы. А нам что?
Fact, Melia, I'm going to pause this. There's nothing fake about what they're doing. These are live exercises. Remember Mike Pompeo saying that? This is a live exercise.
Mm-hmm.
These are live exercises. Folks.
Yeah, we do believe nukes are real. We believe the gun bullets that are being used are real. And the
people get
who
killed.
Are dying,
they don't care.
Yeah.
They kill people to accomplish their goals. That's called a Holocaust. It's a burnt offering.
Yeah.
Крупные страны, лидера НАТО, как США, и там легко может появиться все, что угодно. Система противоракетной обороны, и новые базы, и, если потребуется, и новые ударные комплексы. А нам что делать? Мы должны в этой связи предпринимать контрмеры, то есть ставить под удар наших ракетных систем те объекты, которые, по нашему мнению, начинают нам угрожать. Ситуация напрягает.
If we are attacked, we would certainly respond.
Знаете, мне кажется, я не всегда понимаю логику наших партнеров. Иногда складывается впечатление, что нужно держать в повиновении и наладить дисциплину в своем собственном западном, так называемом, атлантическом лагере. Для этого нужен внешний враг. При всех опасениях Иран на это не очень тянет.
I am concerned about the expansion of NATO. NATO has expanded into 13 countries up to the borders of Russia.
Right up to
13 countries.
Эта тема очень опасная. Это тема войны. Война между Россией и Соединенными Штатами вообще это безумие.
Yeah, he gets it. War between the United States and Russia would be madness. Why? Why would they pushing right up against adding NATO, right up against the border of Russia? This has always been about Russia. And why? Well, because they're Nazis.
In early spring of 2014, eastern Ukraine was also buzzing with protests against the new authorities in Kiev. This region, with the population close to Russia geographically and culturally, feared that the ultra-right leanings of the newly formed government would bring neo-nationalism to their lands. And they had their reasons. The status of the Russian language in Ukraine has been a stumbling block for many years.
Remember Kyiv and Kiev? Here you go. The status of the Russian language. Let me let this come back. The status of the Russian language in Ukraine is a problem for the American versions.
Implementing Russian as a second state language was one of the main campaign promises of President Viktor Yanukovych.
In 2012, the Yanukovych government passed a law making it the second official language in the southern and eastern parts of Ukraine, the areas where the Russian-speaking population makes up a majority. Ukrainian nationalist groups initiated massive protests opposing the law. An observing viewer might see some familiar faces there. On February 23, 2014, the very next day after the regime change, the new government voted for an annulment of the official status of the Russian language. And even though later this decision was vetoed by the acting president, Alexander Turchinov, it still sent a message, and a powerful one. This alarmed the Russian-speaking cities of eastern Ukraine, and people took to the streets to show their disagreement.
Now, folks, this is getting closer to where we're at right now, so you'll understand.
Response, pro-Maidan groups conducted their own demonstrations. When the two parties would meet, it was always tense, and eventually it led to tragedy.
The name of that place look familiar?
One person died and over 50 people were wounded in clashes during a pro-Russian march protesting the new government in Kiev. On April 6th, the Crimean scenario began repeating in eastern Ukraine, where protesters seized government buildings. And the next day, April 7th, they proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic. Kiev replied by announcing the beginning of an anti-terrorist operation in eastern Ukraine. By that time, the international media was screaming about a Russian invasion in Ukraine.
Russia could now be on the verge of invading Ukraine.
But strong words stayed only in the media. The Ukrainian authorities never announced a warlike situation. Why? IMF cannot give money to countries engaged in ongoing war. Petro Poroshenko.
Вы знаете, в большой политике, о чем бы ни говорили, все равно будут говорить о деньгах.
Too much money was already invested in Ukraine to stop halfway.
We've invested over $5 billion to assist Ukraine in these and other goals that will ensure a secure and prosperous and democratic Ukraine.
How much of that $5 billion went to the people? How much of that $5 billion went to the oligarchs and the people running these operations to fund these operations within Ukraine?
Well, we know none of it went to the Donetsk and the Luhansk regions. If
None.
you've watched any of the videos from there, they're very, very poverty stricken.
Oh, awful. Awful.
На развитие какой демократии тратились эти деньги? Как называли установление демократического режима? Я думаю, что это вот как раз тот режим, который сейчас насаждается на Донбассе.
Obviously, the funds had to keep coming, and the conflict had to keep going. Getting more and more bloody and deadly.
Мы завалили все вместе.
Pawns. They've made people pawns.
As parties from both sides were using more sophisticated and lethal weapons.
Yeah, do these look like separatists with fighter jets and tanks and all of that? No, this was Russia and the Nazis in Ukraine fighting. So the U.S. backing the Nazis against Russia in Ukraine in those two territories. That is why Putin, when he went in, he first recognized both of those territories as independent.
Derek, fast forward to 119. That's where we're talking about Odessa. I think that if you've been watching this, you'll see, they've taken Odessa. So that's to the southwest of Ukraine.
Okay.
It's at the 1 hour, 19 minute mark.
Go to 1 hour, 19.
Was welcomed with a long round.
Hold on, let's get back up just a little bit.
Disturbances in the center of the city as they marched to the anti-Maidan tent encampment, where they attacked. The anti-Maidan protesters sought shelter in the trade union house, but it was a trap. Maidan supporters started throwing Molotov cocktails into the building until it was engulfed in flames. People burned to death inside, or, trying to escape, jumped from the windows. Although a fire station was less than a mile away, it took almost half an hour for firefighters to arrive. When they finally did, the damage had been done. But here's an intriguing fact. Just a few days before those dreadful events, a messenger from Maidan, Andriy Perubi, made a visit to Odessa. It's an interesting coincidence that some of the people he met with in Odessa were seen at the scene that fateful day.
Ray Epps, ring a bell?
But not everyone was mourning. On the popular political talk show Schuster Live, the news about the people burnt alive in Odessa was welcomed with a long round of applause.
Із погибших в пожарі в Одесі 15 граждан Росії, 10 із Придністров'я і ні одного одесита.
On its Facebook page, the right sector announced the events of May 2nd, a proud moment in national history. An official investigation into this sad event has been going on now for nearly 2 years, and it's yet to reach a conclusion. But it seems the experts had all the information they needed from the very beginning.
Звичайно, провокація була з сторони путінських бойовиків, які почали розкол української демонстрації.
It looks like Odessa really is a very important piece of real estate, as it was honored with a very special new governor appointed on May 30th of 2015.
This part.
Mikhail Sakashvili, an old friend of the United States.
Oh, there you go.
Born and raised in Ukraine's neighboring country, Georgia.
Hold on, let's just back that up.
The information they
Hold
needed
on. Let's just back that up. Let me just get to that.
Neighboring country, Georgia.
Come on.
The information they needed from the very beginning.
Звичайно, провокація була з сторони путінських бойовиків, які почали розкол української демонстрації.
It looks like Odessa really is a very important piece of real estate, as it was honored with a very special new governor appointed on May 30th of 2015. Mikhail Sakashvili, an old friend of the...
Just look at that. Would you look at it? Would you look at it? Is that W? Just wanted to make sure there's no mistaken.
United States, and born and raised in Ukraine's neighboring country, Georgia.
A little hoedown there in Georgia.
A quick look at his biography gives one an understanding that he's been groomed for a special mission. Mr. Saakashvili received a U.S. State Department scholarship, and he worked for a New York law firm which represented the organization Kamara.
How about that?
A group that appeared earlier when we learned about the color revolutions.
We are dealing with democratic, bloodless revolution.
This is the Revolution of Roses, and this is Mikhail Saakashvili with Kamara, busy overthrowing the legitimately elected president, Eduard Shevardnadze.
Remove the government by peaceful means. That's classics, you're really European. I'm proud.
Soon after the Rose Revolution blossomed fully, Georgia announced its intentions to join NATO. Plant fresh NATO military bases in the fertile soil right on Russia's border.
Oh, yeah.
Never, ever we will give our freedom and independence. Never, ever will give any piece of our territory.
Saakashvili's mission was accomplished, at least with his friends in NATO. The Georgian populace wasn't quite as happy, though. In 2007, they took to the streets to voice discontent. And Mr. Saakashvili responded with force. The people's discontent grew. Saakashvili's party lost parliamentary elections, and the opposition took control.
He said this means that the parliamentary majority should set up a new government and me as the president, according to our constitution.
Mikhail decided not to wait for the results of the president's election.
Oh, watch
and
this.
Fled the country in October 2013. In 2014, Saakashvili refused summons to appear in court as a witness in several criminal cases. Later that same year, he was accused of misuse of power and embezzlement. Saakashvili wound up in the U.S., and soon his friends in Washington found him a new assignment.
Oh, isn't this interesting?
Mikhail actively supported Maidan, and very soon was rewarded with a high position in the new Ukrainian government. First as the president's counselor, and then as the governor of Odessa. The day before taking this position, he renounced his citizenship to Georgia, the country of his birth, and became a Ukrainian citizen.
So how crazy is that? This guy was hired by the United States government to go into Georgia, overthrow its government, establish a NATO relationship with Georgia. Then this guy flees because of criminal investigations. Of course, flees or whisked out of the country by us, no doubt. Kicks this guy out of Georgia, the country that is his homeland, and comes to the U.S. and then is given a new job in the Ukrainian government, who they've propped up. Remember the video I showed at the beginning of Biden negotiating with the president of Ukraine? Crazy.
Я навсегда останусь гордым гражданином моей гордой родины. Гордым гражданином моей гордой родины.
He's such a proud citizen. He just,
as they say,
left.
The battle is worth the blood, both literally and figuratively.
And there he is.
Я прекрасно знаю реальную цену реформ господина
And look at him with
Саакашвили.
Obama.
Я прекрасно знаю то, что он на Украине.
Now, is this coincidence? It's just coincidence, right? Totally.
Украине на самом деле является частью проекта, который нужно осуществить Украине определенным силам.
Jeffrey Payet, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, paid a visit to Saakashvili just a month after he took office in Odessa.
But as long as the Oblast administration is delivering results on Ukraine, you are going to see a steady flow of embassy and Washington visitors coming here.
The meeting was fruitful, and Jeffrey generous. No matter how well Saakashvili's job goes, it looks like he shouldn't be worried about his own finances. On his Facebook page, he posted an official document showing that the new governor of Odessa gets a pretty penny from Washington, almost $200,000 a year. For comparison, the governor of Maine gets $70,000 a year. So if Odessa became a new U.S. state, it would be at the top of the list. Mr. Saakashvili should feel right at home in his newly adopted country. He is best of friends with fellow color revolutionary leader Viktor Yushchenko, who's the godfather of his son.
Yep.
Губернатором Одесской области назначен бывший президент Саакашвили. Это просто плевок, оскорбление одесситам, да и всему украинскому народу. Ему не дали даже рабочую визу в США. Университеты, в которых его пытались трудоустроить, не захотели его брать на постоянную работу. Значит, исполнять обязанности губернатора Одессы он может. А что, нет порядочных, профессиональных и способных выполнять такую работу украинцев?
A war, once launched, doesn't choose its victims.
Nope.
We are just learning at this hour that
So let's go ahead. Planes
was shot down by a surface-to-air missile that was launched from an area that is controlled.
Again, going back to the false flags earlier.
These questions.
Planes
But
get
even
shot
without
down.
any answers, the fingers were pointed immediately.
That's not an accident. That is happening because of Russian support. Evidence indicates that the plane was shot down by a surface-to-air missile that was launched from an area that is controlled by Russian-backed separatists inside of Ukraine.
И, безусловно, государство, на территории которого это произошло, несет ответственность за эту страшную трагедию.
The Malaysian Boeing wasn't the first plane to play a significant part in American-Russian relationships. On September 1st, 1983, Korean Airlines Flight 007 from New York to Seoul via Anchorage was shot down by a Soviet interceptor aircraft over the territory of the USSR in the Sea of Japan.
Or was
it? There was absolutely no justification, either legal or moral, for what the Soviets did.
The tragedy of the Korean Boeing was considered a perfect occasion to demonstrate the NATO military power within dangerous proximity to the Soviets. On November 2nd, 1983, NATO launched Able Archer, a 10-day command post exercise simulating a conflict escalation, culminating in a nuclear attack. It was followed by placing Pershing II nuclear missiles in Europe. What Reagan didn't take into consideration was the paranoid overreaction of the Soviets. A recently declassified U.S. intelligence report shows that for the first...
See, now remember how they were saying Putin putting those soldiers on the Ukraine border, he's going to attack. Okay, well, of course he did. So we know that he did. He said he wasn't going to, but he did. So we know that he lied. Of course, why is he not going to lie to the liars? And he's going to have his operation. The point of this is not to tell you that he didn't lie, but it's the point of us showing this to you is to show you that this is not as simple as you think, and that the United States is quite responsible for where we're at, and maybe even solely responsible, but they're both playing this game. So again, this is don't pick a side, but understand exactly what is going on. So you're not led into their BS, that you don't buy into one side or the other, that you don't go out there and protest a certain thing and all of that, because they'll use you. They will use you. They're energy vampires. That's what they do.
Time since the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world was that close to nuclear war.
So what I was going to say about this is that the U.S. goes in with NATO, right? It's a defensive force, and mocks right on his borders. They have 13 different nations, and mocks right on his borders a simulated nuclear, basically war that ends in nuclear warfare with Russia, right on Russia's borders. And Russia is not supposed to be concerned about NATO and all of these things in Ukraine and everything that's happened with it. It's absolutely, to say it's unprovoked is insanity.
Just like in 1983, the Malaysian Boeing crash was leveraged against the enemy. A new wave of sanctions hit Russia immediately after the tragedy.
The United States is imposing new sanctions in key sectors of the Russian economy.
Almost a year and 3 months later, the Dutch Safety Board published a report.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Flight MH17 crashed because of a 9N314M warhead detonated outside the aeroplane above the left side of the cockpit.
The report didn't blame any specific group or person and estimated a very wide area of 320 kilometers as a zone from which the missile was fired.
Pay attention to this. This is interesting.
At the same time, the Russian producer of Buk missiles, Almazante, conducted its own independent investigation.
And it wasn't one of their missiles at all.
Полностью опровергли выводы голландской комиссии о типе ракеты и месте запуска.
During the experiment, they blew up a retired airliner with a Buk missile and came to the conclusion that the Malaysian plane was brought down by the older type of missiles, not used by Russia anymore, but still in the possession of Ukraine. The company claims that the missile was launched from the territory controlled by the Ukrainian military. One would expect that these controversial results would again stir up public interest in the investigation, but the tragedy of Malaysian flight MH17 had already played its role in the big geopolitical game. Therefore, it was soon forgotten. The goal was achieved. After the third wave of sanctions hit Russia, the tensions between the two countries skyrocketed. So the question presents itself: are we truly witnessing the beginning of Cold War 2.0? And if so, what are our chances to survive at this time?
So that's essentially the end of this. There's a little bit more, but they're just not going through details. So we won't go, but everybody should watch the entire thing in its entirety, just so you understand that this is a documentary that came out in 2016, and obviously a ton of research and a ton of work went into it. And I'll show you right here. This is on IMDb. Ukraine on Fire is the name. And it is directed by Igor Lapatanuk and writer Vanessa Dean. And obviously, it's the executive producer is Oliver Stone. So, Oliver Stone hasn't bought anything that our government has told them. But, he's primarily thought that it was the right, I think. But I think he's learned that it's the right and the left, and it's this country. It's what we've done. It's NATO. It's the cabals. Again, we're battling the cabals. This is Inky and Enlil crap.
And it knows no political party boundary, if you can watch that and stomach that. See, that's where you start to see the George Bushes and the Ronald Reagan even. And all of these folks help usher in, whether it's conspiracy, open conspiracy or not, we know that it is Satan's conspiracy. And if God can conspire through all of us as the body of Christ, so can Satan. And we know that, we talk about the conspiracy theories, it almost seems too big for people to go, there's no way these people could have conspired to do all of these things together. You don't need to get people to conspire. Just let them fall to the lesser evils and the worst parts of who they are. And the enemy will ensure that all of those things come to pass.
The enemy always makes sure that that his work's going to come to pass. And we've endured that. But folks, just so you understand is, again, what is truth? Malia saying earlier that Pontius Pilate had more in common with Jesus than he had with anybody else. Looking at this and going, when he says, I am truth, and he says, what is truth?
What is that?
I don't even know what truth is anymore. I don't know when I'm telling the truth. I don't know when I'm telling the lie, because I'm even so manipulated. This is why I've always pointed out that there is no one single man or one single government involved in this. This is an enemy-conducted operation. Nobody could be this good. This is the Matrix.
Well, and you're going to see, too, I think Zelensky is going to come out, and I really thought last week when he spoke at Munich, I thought he showed a lot of Christ-like qualities. And I think Vladimir could show lots of, Putin could show Christ-like qualities. We have to be aware that those things exist, and we are not to judge any man, right? We don't judge each other. We judge ourselves. The government rests on our shoulders.
Ours.
Yeah.
Folks, if you haven't, you can join me on Twitter at The Global Witness, only with one S, though, because they wouldn't let me have the second S. Don't know why. And you'll find Malia's also on there. We're quite different on Twitter because Twitter doesn't allow you the longer conversations like we have here. But there's a lot here. I just want to let you know, when you're looking at that war, this is something that I pointed out. These are the people on the left fleeing Kiev, right? These are the people on the right that were fleeing Kuwait when we went in there. That's what we do to the people that are fleeing the city when there's war. So I would say that when Putin says that he has a strategic operation, that's absolutely correct. That's what he's doing. It is a strategic operation, and it's very tactical. It's very specific and has been. So, and by the way, during the course of this, the separatists have bombed schools and blaming it on Putin. So this is how this works. This is why I said here that this is just Inky and Enlil. And prophecy, yes. And somebody said Russia takes Ukraine, China takes Taiwan, and Iran targets Israel. Are we looking at the start of Gog and Magog? Well, I would say that it's Iran doesn't target Israel necessarily. That Israel gets to target Iran or Damascus and Syria, which they're already doing. So there's a lot more going on. This movie obviously doesn't cover all of the subject matter.
And we have, and I think I'm looking at make sure I see this comment correctly from Sage Bees. Derek, I'm confused. Last year you were disclosing the rabbit hole of the Noahide law, and now you're justifying Putin's occupation of Ukraine. Again, I don't know if you just tuned in, Sage Bees, but we did disclose everything in the very beginning. And if you've been following along through the video, you might want to go back to the beginning and watch that part. But we are not trying to take sides here. What we're trying to do is show you that the truth is we don't know the full truth. We can watch and observe. And this is what we're called to do, to watch and discern the times. There were many people, whether you can wrap your head around this or not, who, when Jesus died, they didn't believe he was a good guy, right? We just see it in retrospect. But during that time, these people, even during the Acts of the Apostles, they were like, yeah, that guy was a loser or whatever. I can guarantee it. People struggle with these things. It's not until after the fact that truth, full truth, comes out. And that's true in my life. That's true in Derek's life. That'll be true in your life as well. So we're not trying to say that Vladimir Putin's a great guy. We're not trying to say that. What we're trying to say is there may be more of a why to his purpose than what you're seeing in the news. So open your mind, be willing to see truth for what it is. And then truth is one of those things that gets revealed over time. And then we all know. We don't all know now. We see through a glass dimly now, but one day we will see face to face and we will know.
Yeah. Now, I want to address a part of this because Sage B's saying that disclosing the rabbit hole of the Noahide laws. Well, I'm not saying that those aren't coming too. And like Melia said, maybe you came into the show late. I'm not justifying. And when you use somebody's words and you use a name like that, putlers and things like that, that's just a mocking thing. So, I'm going to ignore that for the moment and say Putin's occupation of Ukraine. First of all, Putin isn't occupying Ukraine if you've watched any of this movie. So please watch the documentary that I'll put the link right now for the documentary in the chat box, and you can go watch it and decide for yourself. But stop paying attention to the mainstream media. But understand, do I think that that Russia might have something to do with Noahide laws later on? Of course. I'm not taking anybody's side here. This is the whole point. I'm just trying to point it out to you, because if you're following the narrative that Putin's wrong and it's unprovoked, then you will get led into their color war. You'll be used for it.
Right.
So this is the whole point. This is why my people perished for lack of knowledge. Pay attention to what's going on. Use your head. It's amazing when people can't see this. It's like you want to poke them and go, are you real? Are you human? So I get it. It's a frustrating thing. I do understand. But
it's one of the reasons, Derek, I do think that Jesus did not allow the zealots to use him, right? They wanted to use Jesus himself to foster that war against the terrible oppression of the Romans. But see, he knew not to be used. He did not allow himself to be used in that way. He chose to make an open display of their hypocrisy and laid his life down. So I think that, trying to really just focus on the words of Jesus and how Jesus taught us to walk and observe and rightly divide, because it's difficult to tell, just like with Peter. Peter himself thought, I will never deny you. And Jesus looks right at him. He's like, oh, Peter, you don't even know yourself.
You don't even know.
You don't even know yourself. And I would just say that then, and I didn't mean to say that to sound like I was coming against someone, because we're totally not about doing that. Everyone's in a different stage of understanding or whatever, but I would just say, keep an open mind, Sage Bees, and thank you for the comment.
For sure. Let me go see if we get to anybody else's comments before we end this. I will also let you know that the globalwitness.org social site is going to be taking on some transfigurations and more things added to it. Also, the RenewTube. There's a lot of different pieces that are going on. We're going to have to make some changes. Number one, because we need to be able to support ourselves one way or the other, and we can't continue to have things when we go and we invest in building this and having this platform and then constantly being threatened by censorship and all of those things. So many changes coming to that. A Discord channel is still up. I'm sure somebody can put an invite in the chat box for that. Soul's Eye or Divine Renegade or Tracy or somebody. Feel free to drop that in the chat box so people can join the Discord. And just wanted to give you guys an update. And first of all, we always want to thank you all, everybody that supports us. We can't do it without you. This is not easy, and particularly when we're battling sickness and trying to do some work, so we don't have to rely so much on you guys. We don't want to come here and talk about things when we don't have something to talk about, but it is important that we do when it's happening. And I intentionally stayed on past 2:02 because I was going to actually end the stream, and then I looked up at the clock and it literally said 2:22:22, and I was like, yep, nope, that's not happening. I'm not joining their fray. So yes, thank you all for joining us. We appreciate that. Let's see, here we go. I don't need to watch the documentary. I was a political prisoner back in Ukraine in 1984. Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe you were, but you could have been a political prisoner that was paid for by the people with Biden. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Just use your head.
Well, yeah, it's like
they're
said.
Political prisoners in D.C. right now. Do you hate D.C.? Do you hate where those political prisoners there? What are you doing about them, Sage Bees? Go out and help them.
Yeah. Again, go back and watch. I think that you might have a change of heart, but if you don't, that's okay. Everyone here is respectful of others' opinions, and we certainly do create a space for divergent opinion. So thank you again.
Having a divergent opinion, yes, we create space for that. However, I have no place for ostrich heads that are buried beneath the sand. Sorry, that's where Melia and I are different, right? She's much nicer than I am when it comes to that. So, so it's really hot in this office. And the lights don't make it any easier, and the lights are all on me. So I think that we'll tally ho, and I promise you that we will get here as much as we possibly can, much more, particularly as things are going. I would say right now, be prepared. If you're not prepared for a potential false flag, I don't care who is doing it. If it's the U.S. attacking our own system, which I believe probably would happen, again, just like the jet being shot down and then being a Russian missile. Somebody shot it down that had the ability, but it wasn't a Russian missile. So those false flags happen. And if they want the excuse to actually start war, as it seems like they would want to be, because they've been having these color wars behind the scenes with Ukraine for so long. So why is it that we're right out in front of this? But yet also saying we don't want a war with Russia. We don't want a war with Russia. We don't want a war with Russia. Well, guess what? What happens if they attack our banking system and take down ATMs and everybody's in and we have nothing for 2 weeks? People are going to be killing each other for food and gas and everything else. Complete disruption.
And then all of those things that you never thought were resident within you will start to rise to the surface.
Lest
no man boast who enters the kingdom. So thank you again. You guys, we've been sick. You've had so many of you have reached out to me. I had a death in my family, and many of you reached out to me. It was someone very close to me who was super influential in my early life, just my icon growing up, and was very dear to me. So thank you so much for reaching out. We really appreciate that. Your words and your prayers, and just the fact that you take the time to text us personally, that means so much to me.
For sure. Let me see if somebody's trying saying that the link to Discord is invalid. So let me just go into Discord, create another link right now, and get it for you if I could find that. Let's go. I'll make it so it never expires. Generate that new link, copy it. Here it is in the chat. Yes, real BP Earthwatch. Russia will be blamed for the hacks, but we know who will do it. Exactly. This is the point. This is all I'm trying to say, folks, is wake up.
By the US of A.
Wake up and smell your country.
Doesn't mean that Russia doesn't do those same things.
Of course not.
Read Sun Tzu's Art of War. All's fair. What's the saying? All's fair in love and war. But that's this broken system here. We live here in this broken system. That's why we have to rightly divide.
Absolutely. We love you much. Please share this. Hit the thumbs up. It really helps the algorithms. It's hungry. It feeds on it, as Divine Renegade likes to say. So please click the thumbs up, share, and comment down below this video. All those things, all interactions help. Even your chat helps. But if you are not a subscriber, they just did a purge at YouTube. YouTube purges channels every single year. They just say, oh, not everybody's a real subscriber or something like that. And they purge some people. So they took away 200 or 300 people like in 10 seconds. And then about 150 of them came back. So yes. And thank you, mods. Thank you, guys. You are the best. We love you all. We thank you for joining us and supporting us. Please share, subscribe, and don't forget to watch that whole movie. So at least you're informed and you can inform others. We love you much, and we'll see you soon.